1,181 verses of the Bible. You can believe the rest of it. Okay? Now that does not mean that I'm not saying that you're gullible. If you believe the first, part of it, that means that you're gullible enough to believe the rest. What I mean is that the first 1,181 verses, Genesis 1:1 through Genesis 12:3, laid the foundation for everything else that we find in the Bible, plus what we find beyond the Bible. And so there's a reason that it is called the book of origins. That's what Genesis means. There's a reason that it is called that. And so I don't know, how many of you have ever read Genesis chapter 1 through 9? Maybe this year, or maybe you've read it before. Have you read Genesis 1 through 9? Okay. In 9 chapters, and you may not have paid attention to it like this, but here's what I want you to understand. In just the first 9 chapters, what you have seen is the glory of God in creation. What you have seen is the relationship between God and man. First off, you have seen what God wanted the relationship between him and his creation to be. And then you have seen the relationship that we now have because of Adam and Eve's disobedience and the fall, okay? We have seen the gospel declared, the promise that there would be a Messiah that would be sent. We have seen the foundation for atonement. Not only is it acted out when God sacrifices an animal and covers Adam and Eve in their skin, but we've seen it illustrated in the fact that it is the sacrifice that covers us of our sin. We have seen the evidence in Enoch of life after death, after this life, that this life is not all that there is. We have seen that death is necessary for rebirth. The earth had to be wiped clean in order for God to begin again with Noah and his family and the animals. We have seen the foundation for baptism. We've got Adam and Eve, Noah and his family are what? They are saved through the water. It goes into Moses, who's placed in the ark. That's all later stuff, but we've seen this foundation that is being laid ahead of time. We have seen the offer of salvation is not forever. When the door was closed, the opportunity for people to be saved was done. And in the same way, the door of salvation will be closed one day for all of humanity. And we have also seen the fact that there will always be those who will refuse to listen no matter what they see or what they experience. Okay? Now, just curious, how many of you, when you read the Bible, Genesis chapter 1 through Genesis 9, saw all those things when you read it as the story of Adam and Eve, and the story of the fall, and the story of Noah and his ark? See, we don't necessarily, but when we step back and we read the Bible for what it is, which is the story of the glory of God, then we see those things. Because what we realize is that, once again, the Bible's not about us. It is written to us. It is for us. But it is not about us, and it is not just a collection of stories, okay? Yeah, I think I've told a lot of you kind of my story a little bit. 25 plus years ago, I had a revival at CCY, Christ Church of Yukon. Never been to one before, so I decided I'd go. They announced the theme was creation, which I thought was stupid, but I went anyway. And so I go to this revival, and there was a guy by the name of Dr. Grady McMurtry. Dr. Grady McMurtry, ultra smart, I think he's a member of Mensa. He set out with the goal of disproving the Bible and ended up as the founder of Young Earth Creationist Society. Completely changed his life. And one of the things that he did is he brought and had a picture, and it was a picture of Mount St. Helens, okay, before the eruption, but it looked like it was completely out of focus, okay? And he's like, I know it looks like I'm a bad photographer, but then you could see the helicopter that they were taking the picture out of, the the foot, whatever, the foot rail, that you got there, the what? Skid. Okay, the skid, thank you. This is why I need help. I'm good to go. Is in perfect focus. It's just the mountain that's out of focus. You look around, you see others that's out of focus. The reason is because he says, I was lucky enough, I took this picture at the instant that Mount St. Helens erupted. And the mountain had just started to move, and so it looks like it's all out of focus. And then he made this statement, and he said, he goes, I spent lots of time there. He said, right now, he said, this was, like I said, 2000, we're talking 20 years later. He said, I could take a scientist, a geologist, whatever, paleontologist, anthropologist, whatever, and if they never ever knew that there had been an eruption at Mount St. Helens, I could take and show them hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of geological processes that had taken place in a matter of days and months. In fact, all of it happened within 6 months. We had the volcano eruption, and then there's some things that happened afterwards. And then he quoted, he said, Romans 8:28, which we read today, and we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And you're like, okay, what does that have to do with like apologetic stuff or this and that? Here's the deal. There are people that have believed for thousands of years that the earth is 6,000 years old, that it is a young earth and a literal 6-day creation. And the thing is that for all of the destruction and everything that happened at Mount St. Helens, what it was exactly that. It was something that gave people who said, no, we believe that God created everything. We believe in a literal 6-day creation. We believe in a young earth. We believe that everything did not come from nothing, but instead that God spoke and it happened. And it gave them, just treasure troves of data and of science that they were able to go and use in ways that it refutes this idea of the earth being, 4.5 billion years old and the universe is 16.5 billion years old and all of this stuff. And so they have taken that, and it really, out of this, what was seen as a horrible time, okay, and it was, but you look from 1980 to today, the creation science that has been able to be seen and followed up on is just absolutely incredible. And so as a result, what you've got is that it went from a place where, the biblical account is not just plausible and possible, but in so many ways it's verifiable. It's verifiable. Okay? And I do want to say something, because I've said this before, but I want you to understand, you're going to meet people all day long. They all have a worldview. We talk so many times about having a biblical worldview. It's what I want all of you to have, is a biblical worldview. What does that mean? It means that you view the world through the lens of the Bible. It is a biblical worldview. Okay, that's why we're doing this series. But here's the deal. Everybody's got a worldview. Everybody's got one. I don't care whether you're talking to atheists, agnostics, Hindus, Mormons, Buddhists, whatever, Muslims, does not matter, okay? Everybody has a worldview. What that means is that is the way that they see the world. So we come into this with preconceived ideas. We come into it with presuppositions. We look at things and we see it. In fact, did you know, go on Facebook today and look up, there is a Flat Earth Society on Facebook. They got a page, okay? There are, and I'm saying we chuckle, but do you realize there are people all over this planet who believe that the earth is flat? With all of their heart. And they look at all of the information, they look at all of the data, they look at all of the pictures from NASA and all of the space exploration and everything else, and they say, oh no, it's a hoax. That's not what it says. It really means this, because we know the world is flat. Okay? The fact is that everybody's got that. Everybody has that worldview. If you talk to an atheist, what does an atheist say? There is no God. And they view everything from that context. An agnostic says, I don't think that there is a God, but I don't know for sure. They view everything through that context. A Muslim sees it through the context of Allah. Hindus see it through their gods. So everybody has a world view, and we need to understand that, okay? Now, going back to, I know we've talked about the flood. We've been in this early stage, and I want to say one thing when it comes to the flood. Please hear me. The flood is not a salvation issue. But it is oh so very important to the issue of salvation. Why? Jesus referenced it. Jesus spoke about it. Jesus believed in it, told his people about it. So if we don't believe what he said about the flood because, we don't really care about that, then how do we take the other things that he said? See, we start getting into, this is one of the reasons that when people start talking about, well, those Old Testament stories are good, but I'm a New Testament Christian. I'm going to read the New Testament. Just going to read that New Testament. Because the Old Testament, it's some really cool stories. But this is what I base it on. Well, you know what? When Jesus looked back there, when it all bounces back and forth, the cross references, when Jesus himself said, don't tell me that the story, I told you last week, don't tell me the story of Jonah is a big fish tale. Why? Because Jesus used it as a reference and said, just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Jesus said that it will be the same at the coming of the Son of Man as it was in the time of Noah, which was before the flood. And so, no, you cannot discount. So when I do say that the flood is not a salvation issue, you're not going to get saved because you believe in the flood, okay? But the flood is very important when it comes to the issue of salvation. And so we need to read it as, that's where this, once again, the first part of it is very, 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 very important. And so, what do we see? What did the flood accomplish? Number one, it did accomplish God's judgment against mankind. In fact, and I love it, who saw the rainbow yesterday? Anybody see the rainbow? How cool is that? I tell you what, every time I see a rainbow, it just reminds me that when God makes a promise, he keeps his promise. It just causes me to pray every time. But we get a whole lot of, implications that we find through the flood. But it goes even beyond just the spiritual implications. And I kind of want to talk a little bit about some of that because we've probably all seen, have you ever seen the textbooks and everything else? They have these the strata illustration that it's got all the different layers of strata, the Paleocene and whatever they all are. They got all these names, and then in them they've got all the little, all the fossils that go with them, and this goes with the Paleozoic, and this is with the this, and this is with the that, and not yet on that one. So this one and that one, and they talk about all of this stuff. And so did you ever figure out why it is that they can tell you that one layer of strata is 100,000 years old? They do that by looking at the fossils that they find in that layer of dirt, in that strata. Okay, and it's kind of simplistic, but they're really, in a lot of ways, it's what they do, is they look at it that way. So do you know how they know, though, that those fossils are 100,000 years old, that those things lived 100,000 years ago? Because of the layer of strata that they're in. I'm sorry, think about this for a second. That is the same as saying that go back. We're going to get there in just a second, just stay. Because everybody's going to start looking and trying to figure out what it is. That is the same as saying that this is a church building because there are Christians inside it. And how do you know we're Christians? Because we're in a church building. Think about it. Isn't that's circular reasoning? And in so many, and I'm not saying that all the science, there's other, they radiocarbon dating and a lot of these different things that come in, but they're not as accurate. Radiocarbon dating is, if you ever heard of carbon-14 dating is what it is, and it's like what's supposed to be in an animal, in a plant, in a bone, in a whatever, and based upon how old it is, then it is how much is left, and that tells us, the way that it disappears. The problem is that there's a whole lot of assumptions. You got to know what you started with. You got to know what's happened all the time throughout. There's a whole lot of things that have to happen, and honestly, carbon-14 dating, it's not that it's completely bunk. I'm not going to say that, but it's really, most scientists tell you, plus about 20 or 30,000 years, it's really not very accurate at all. Yet we use carbon-14 data to tell us that things are 1.4 million years old, that this was all of this time. Well, it's not accurate, okay, at that point. And here's the problem. There is something that is called, and I'll give you a big word, it's called uniformitarianism, okay? Uniformitarianism. It's easy for me to say. Uniformitarianism is the belief that everything has happened at a uniform rate all throughout time. That there have been some catastrophes, but by and large, everything has happened over this uniform time frame, okay? That everything takes the same amount of time. We get layers of strata, that's how they count them, that are added up, right? Because we've got X amount, and so we know each one of those is an era. Well, that assumes that it was all laid down in this uniform manner. And the thing is that as we look at the Bible, what do we see? We see right here that in a worldwide catastrophic flood, does that not throw the whole theory of uniformity out the window? Okay? And so that is why, it is so important. Mount St. Helens, and this is where it was such a great example. Mount St. Helens, there is, and I've got a before and after. Got a before and after of Mount St. Helens up there. Okay, the one on your left is before. The one on the right is after, just in case you were wondering. What you see is down there in front of it, there is a canyon. There's a canyon that was created. It is 1/40th the size of the Grand Canyon. And the fact is that that canyon was carved in a matter of, most of it, 1 day. Okay? 1 day is when that happened. There's a really deep part of the canyon which runs about 100 feet deep through basalt bedrock. Okay, we're not talking about loose soil. We're talking about bedrock that is 100 feet deep, and that was done within 6 months of the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Okay, there's another one that's like 600 feet deep, and there's a river that runs through it as well. As you look up there and you see there's a river runs through it. But here's the deal. The river didn't cause the canyon. The river exists because of the canyon. Now, the reason I tell you this is that is 1/40th the size of the Grand Canyon. And I would tell you that many of the same processes that took place to create that canyon are the same things that happened that caused the Grand Canyon, but on a much bigger scale. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of it, but here's one deal. For the Colorado River to have carved the Grand Canyon, it had to flow uphill for maybe a couple million years so that it could start to carve through, so that then there could be a canyon so that it could start to flow. If you look at the staircase, the plateau where we come from the Grand Canyon down, there's no way. All of that has been washed out. Okay, it was not a river that was flowing through there. It was a catastrophic flood. And I would submit to you that it was following the flood. It was an earthen dam that broke loose. When it did, it busted loose. You can create a canyon a couple of ways. You can do a little bit of water a lot of time, or you can do a lot of water and just a little bit of time, and you can create the exact same thing. But they do look a little bit different. And so when we start talking about the flood of Genesis 6 through 9, it explains all of these stuff that we see around the world. And here's the thing I want you to understand, because I know this sounds like I'm like giving a TED talk, and that's not it at all, because this really does. This is important to understand, okay? The very first week of this, you remember I took a book, and I held the book, and I asked you to close your eyes, and then I dropped the book, and I asked you what happened, okay? So when you opened your eyes, you looked around, and you see different conditions, whether it's where people are sitting, whether it's where the book is, whether it's, what you hear, whatever. So I want you to imagine for a moment that you have 10 current conditions. Okay, you've got 10 current conditions that you're looking at. And you have a variety of people that come forward, and they have theories about how those conditions came about, okay? Whether it's how the book got there, whether it's how this got, whatever it is. You've got these 10 conditions, people come forward, and one of them says, oh, I've got a theory that perfectly explains condition number 1. And then somebody else comes forward and says, I don't know about number 1, but I have got a theory that perfectly explains conditions 7 and 8, okay? And then somebody else comes along and says, well, 5, 6, and 7, I think my theory for 7 is better than his theory for number 7, okay? And so you've got you've got these current conditions that people have got a theory about how it came about. And so you go, well, one's got 2, one's doing 3, another one's got like 1, somebody else, well, I think maybe. And then somebody comes along and says, I have a theory that explains all 10 of them. And it's plausible. Who are you going to listen to? Seriously. The one that's got all 10, right? That is what we see in the world today. We look around the world, and there are people that have got different theories about, well, this is how something happened. This is how this came about. This is how we got this. But I don't have an explanation for that. Don't have a theory for this. That's not my area of expertise, whatever it is. But we turn around and we look at the Bible and we read, and this is what I'm talking about, is that we read from Genesis 1:1 through Genesis 12:3, 1,181 verses, and we have the foundation, and guess what? It explains all of the stuff that we see. It explains everything, okay? Now, how do we explain mountains that are folded? Does rock bend? Does rock bend or does rock break? Okay, it breaks. So how in the world do you, here, Dennis, next one, the fourth. How do you explain mountains that are bent? How do we explain rocks that are bent? Science can't explain it. You know what, though? The flood can. How do we explain, these are what the one on the right is what they call polystrate fossils. Those are trees, okay, that just happened to stand up. They died. And then they stood there over a few million years as layers of soil built up, and then they got fossilized. Or there was a worldwide flood that uprooted them all, and then as the sediment settled, some of them were poked in going down, some of them were upside down, some of them were laying on their side, and they were fossilized suddenly. Okay? How do you explain, we've got over here, this one down here is actually a fish that was fossilized eating another fish. There are fossils of fish and animals that are giving birth when they are fossilized. Okay, that's not a slow process that we are told fossilization is. That is an instant death, that is an instant burial, that is a quick fossilization. This up here, these are fossils from marine animals that are found on Mount Everest. Top of Mount Everest. Now, science will tell you that is because the Himalayas once were a vast ocean. Yeah, they were. They were all underwater at one time, but not as they want to tell us. It is the fact that there was a worldwide flood. The thing is that as we read the Bible, we find again and again, we find all the explanations, okay, of what it is, of how we got it there. It eliminates the need for billions of years. As far as the mountains, as far as this, just real quick, right now, because everybody wonders, so where'd all the water go? Where'd all the water? Well, some of it went back into the ground, okay? We know that it rained for 40 days. We know that the waters rose on the earth for 150 days, and then they began to recede. So well over 6 months, the entire earth is covered in water to a level of 20 feet deep. The highest hills, it was 20 feet over them. Okay, then the waters began to recede. So we've got well over half a year that the entire earth is covered with water. Now, does mud get softer, 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 softer the more water that it absorbs, the longer it sits in it? Absolutely, okay? And so you have an entire topography, the geology of Earth, which is soft, which is pliable. As the water begins to recede, this is where I think the Grand Canyon, there's an earthen dam that breaks loose, the water rushes out. As it does, it carves a canyon, but at the same time, as water rushes into an area, you have, and it begins to pool in one, Think about it. Take a piece of saran wrap. If you start to pour water across it, as one part gets lower, everything rushes there, right? Okay, now if the rest of it cannot sink, what's it going to do? It's going to come up. That would explain where we get mountains that are suddenly thrust up, that are folded mountains. I mean, there's so many things that are easily explainable by a worldwide catastrophic flood. Now, where did the water go? Some of it was absorbed back into the earth. We know that because we find underground aquifers. We depend on underground aquifers. We depend on underground springs. We know that water was absorbed into the rock as well. But here's the deal. 70% of our planet is covered by our oceans. If you were to level out the mountains that we have now and you were to bring up the sea floor, there is enough water in the oceans alone to cover the entire earth to a depth of over 1.5 miles. There is no shortage of water. It's all here. Which, how cool is this? Knowing the hydrological cycle, do you realize just the other day, we got rained on by some of the same rain from the flood of Noah? Well, I'm sorry, it's just kind of cool. But anyway, I do. Hey, can you play that video? I want to show you guys something because this is a lot of times we think of the flood and it's kind of like, it starts to rain the way it goes. If we can, this is a little closer. It was not a gentle rain. Yeah, based upon what they're kind of showing, that's from Answers in Genesis. They're talking about 8 hours to completely flood the earth. Okay, it was catastrophic. And so to sit here and to say that it can't explain everything that we see, it explains all of the geological functions and everything that we see. And here, Romans 1:20 was a verse that we read early on. It said that since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made, so that men are without excuse. And here's the deal. If you would like to study more about that stuff, to answersingenesis.com, great resource. Carm.org, CARM.org, because the fact is, honestly, guys, we could go on, and I love this stuff. We go on and on and on forever of talking about all of this evidence and everything else. But the fact is that I told you 25 years ago I was at a revival in Yukon, and when I'm at this revival, it's about creation, and I remember that I'm sitting there, and I kind of had this moment to where I had been raised in church. I was raised in church, and I was taught that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, okay? But then I went to school. And when I went to school, no, they told me that it was a big bang. They told me that 16.5 billion years ago, nothing all of a sudden became everything. Okay, I had gone to Sunday school and been taught, that we were made in the image of God. But then I go to school and it says that it was amoebas to lizards to eagles to monkeys to people. Okay, and that Lucy was my ancestor somehow, that we were all related and connected, that we all evolved from this same thing. That's what I was taught. But the fact is that at the age of 9, I was baptized. When I was baptized, I told my parents that I wanted to be a preacher when I grew up. I guess I just didn't know it'd take this long. But I told my mom and dad, I said I wanted to be a preacher when I grew up. But then I went to school. And I will be honest, there was a time I would sit there and I believed in what I had committed my life to. But I will also tell you, I didn't engage with anybody. Because my fear was that if I sat down with somebody who was really, really smart about geology, or somebody who was really, really smart about evolution, or somebody who was really, really smart about science, that somehow they would prove to me that what I had placed my faith in was wrong. And here was the fear. I'm just telling you, here was the fear. If the first 11 chapters of this are wrong, what did I place my faith in? If the first 11 chapters can be proven wrong, then I have placed my eternity in a lie. And so as a result, I'll tell you what I did. I didn't engage because I didn't want to know. I mean, it's like that, when you feel something on your arm, you're like, I really ought to get that checked out, but I don't really want to know because it might be something bad. And know what we do? And that was the same way when it came to my salvation. And then I go and I'm sitting here in this revival, and Grady McMurtry is talking, and all of a sudden I had such a conviction come over me that the fact is I can't believe the two. I can't look at in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and that we were created along with the animals and the dinosaurs, and then believe that somehow we evolved from everything else. I can't believe that the earth is, I think, 6,000 years old, that 4,500 years ago that there was a flood that wiped everything off of the planet, including the dinosaurs, and then believe, science tells me, that the dinosaurs, they went extinct some 68 million years ago and we never ever met. I can't put the two of them together. And that's what I think I was trying to do in a lot of ways. And in that moment, I came to the conclusion I had to find out which was right and which was wrong. I came to the conclusion that I had to have the answers, and I didn't care where it led me. It was the first time in my life that I had ever been there. And so I got into my Bible, and I started studying, and I started reading. And honestly, I still look back, and I think that revival is the reason that I'm standing here today. Because it absolutely changed my faith. I don't have every answer, but you know what? I'll have a discussion with anybody. You are not going to tell me that evolution is true, because I can show you this and I can talk to you about that. I'm so rock solid in my faith of what, and so, when I sit here and I say that the flood is not a salvation issue, but it is so important to salvation, because if we can just dismiss it out of hand as a children's story, if we can dismiss it as something that we paint on the wall, as we can dismiss it as this, maybe it was worldwide, maybe it was localized, maybe it wasn't all that bad. If we can do that, see, what does that do to the rest of your faith? What does that do when Jesus says, as it was in the days of Noah, so it would be at the coming of the Son of Man? Okay, I'm not going to say, like I said, it's not a salvation issue, but it is so important to it. And it is so important that you and I read. This is where the Bible is not a collection of stories. It is the story of the glory of God. And here, I had the the opportunity, I think it was 2009, because there's a lot of things that we can talk about, and it is great to discuss all of the evidence and all the truth and everything of creation and the flood, and I love to do it, and we can have a conversation any time. Come, give me a call. We will sit down and we'll whip out some books and we will talk and we will pontificate and everything else. I love to do it. You guys know that I do. But here's the deal. In 2009, I had the opportunity to go to the Grand Canyon. We went to the Grand Canyon, and I remember walking out onto this peninsula. And as I'm standing there, I was just overcome. I mean, I'm just standing there. I was in absolute awe and wonder. And the words that came to my lips and to my mind and my heart, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139. But see, Psalm 139 begins in the same way with David saying, oh, Lord, you have searched me and you know me. It ends by asking, see if there is any offensive way in me. Lead me in the way everlasting. We can look at the Grand Canyon to see is it all kinds of evidence that there was a flood. Here's what you can also look at. Look around you. We see it in creation, but we see it in some of these magnificent things. The Grand Canyon stands as a testament to God's hatred of sin. That's what the flood was. The flood was a testament to God's hatred of sin. So you can sit here and tell me it's not really a salvation issue. Yes, it is. It is so important to salvation, because my salvation is the goal of having my sins forgiven, being redeemed, being adopted into the family of God, having God wash me white as snow. But until I understand how much He hates sin, I'm never going to get on my knees and truly surrender my life. I'm never going to get on my knees and give everything up to Him. As long as I think I can get my way out of it, because it's not really a big deal, I am never going to fully surrender my life to Christ. Look at pictures. Whatever you want to call it, Grand Canyon, anything else, and be reminded they are a testament of the flood, and the flood is a testament of God's hatred of sin and what it means to Him. And then as you look at them, see if that drives you to repentance. Does that drive you to a moment of saying, I am so sorry. So sorry for the things that I have done and the things that I have said. Because the same God that sent a flood to destroy the earth is the same God who sent His one and only Son to redeem the earth, so that you and I, who believe, can stand here today and say that I am forgiven, I am redeemed, and I am adopted.